Ethan Cross parked his car in the corner of the Haven Heights hotel lot, its silver paint catching the faint glow of a nearby street lamp. The vehicle was unassuming, much like everything about him tonight. His choice of clothes, a plain hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, was deliberate. This wasn't just a casual visit. Ethan had come with a purpose, though his unassuming attire would make that hard to guess. The hotel loomed before him, its glass facade gleaming under the Los Angeles night sky. Ethan felt a mix of pride and unease. This was his creation, a boutique haven for travelers known for its sleek design and promise of warm hospitality. Yet he wasn't here to admire the architecture. Whispers from colleagues and hints in reviews had raised a concern. The hospitality within wasn't matching the hotel's promise, especially for guests who didn't fit the mold. As he walked through the revolving doors, the familiar lavender scent of the lobby greeted him. The space was exactly as he'd envisioned. Marble floors that gleamed like a mirror, soft ambient lighting bouncing off polished brass fixtures, and the hum of polite conversations. But tonight, Ethan wasn't here as the owner. He was just another man walking into a hotel, hoping to check in. At the reception desk stood Marcus, a young man with perfectly styled hair and the kind of self-assuredness that bordered on smugness. Next to him was Lucy, who appeared absorbed in adjusting her blouse in the reflection of the glass divider. Their laughter echoed faintly as Ethan approached the counter. Marcus barely glanced up, his fingers tapping lazily on the keyboard. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone more out of obligation than genuine interest. "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice steady but polite. "I'm here to check on my reservation. The name is Cross." Marcus didn't hide his sigh, as if this was the last thing he wanted to do tonight. He squinted at the screen, tapping a few keys. Nope, nothing here." Ethan frowned, though he kept his tone even. "Are you sure? I booked it last week. Maybe double check." Marcus rolled his eyes but resumed typing, this time with exaggerated movements as if to mock Ethan's request. After a moment he shrugged. "Still nothing. And anyway, we're fully booked." Lucy, who had been silent until now, leaned closer to Marcus and whispered something. Though her voice was low, Ethan caught enough to make his chest tighten. "Should we call security? He looks like he's in the wrong place." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Ethan kept his face neutral, though inside, a familiar anger simmered. He wasn't new to this, being judged on sight, dismissed before he'd even had a chance to explain himself. But hearing it in his own hotel stung in a way he hadn't expected. "Are you sure you've checked properly?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Marcus's lips twitched into what could only be described as a smirk. "Look, I've already told you, we don't have any rooms. Maybe try somewhere else." Ethan let the moment stretch, watching them both. Lucy avoided his gaze entirely, suddenly busy rearranging papers on the desk. Marcus, on the other hand, stared back with thinly veiled impatience, his arms crossed. There was no mistaking what this was. Ethan had seen it too many times before. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. He could feel the pull to call them out immediately, to reveal who he was and watch their smug expressions dissolve. But he held back. "Not yet." "I understand," Ethan said finally, stepping back from the counter. He wasn't leaving, though. Not yet. He wanted to see how far this would go. Ethan stepped aside from the reception desk, positioning himself near the plush seating area by the lobby's central pillar. From here, he had a clear view of the staff. Marcus had returned to his half-hearted keyboard tapping, while Lucy whispered something to another employee who had just joined them. Every so often, one of them would glance in his direction, their expressions unreadable yet clearly judgmental. He took a moment to absorb the scene. Guests dressed in sharp business suits or fashionable evening wear were greeted with smiles, their inquiries met with enthusiasm. Yet for him, a man whose only distinguishing feature tonight was his casual attire, the service felt cold and dismissive. As Ethan observed, he noticed an older black couple enter the lobby. They approached the desk with hesitant smiles, their suitcases rolling softly on the marble floor. Marcus's demeanor shifted, not to one of hostility, but of a barely concealed disinterest. His tone, while polite, lacked the warmth he'd shown other guests. Ethan watched as the couple's smiles faded slightly, their posture stiffening as they exchanged uncertain glances. It was subtle but unmistakable. They were being treated differently, just as he had been. The couple eventually walked away, their voices hushed as they headed toward the elevators. Ethan felt a pang of anger on their behalf. It wasn't just about him anymore. This was a pattern, a systemic issue within the very walls he built to be a sanctuary for all. He took another steadying breath, then returned to the counter. "I'd like you to check again," Ethan said to Marcus, his tone measured. "I'm certain there's a reservation under my name." Marcus turned toward him with an exasperated expression, leaning one arm on the counter. "Sir, I already told you, we don't have anything. Maybe there's been a mistake on your part." Ethan tilted his head slightly, studying the younger man's face. A mistake, perhaps, but wouldn't it be worth confirming? Marcus sighed dramatically, glancing at Lucy, who gave him a slight shrug as if to say, "Do what you want." Reluctantly, Marcus tapped the keyboard again. This time, the keystrokes were deliberate, though it was clear he wasn't searching for anything. After a few moments, he shook his head. "Nope, nothing here," he said, leaning back and folding his arms. "Look, like I said, we're full. Maybe try somewhere down the street." "Are you absolutely sure?" Ethan pressed. Marcus's expression hardened. "Yes, I'm sure. And if you keep holding up the line, I'll have to ask you to leave." A subtle but unmistakable shift filled the air. Ethan noticed Lucy glance toward the security desk, her lips moving silently as she gestured toward him. The guard stood, straightening his tie before making his way over. Ethan didn't move. He met Marcus's gaze steadily, his face betraying no emotion. But inside, his patience was beginning to wear thin. The security guard, a burly man with a no-nonsense demeanor, approached with measured steps. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "Not a problem, exactly," Marcus replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "This gentleman doesn't have a reservation and refuses to leave." The guard turned his attention to Ethan, his posture stiff. "Sir, if you don't have a booking here, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside." Ethan glanced between Marcus and the guard. He could feel the stares of other guests and staff, the weight of their assumptions pressing down on him. But he stayed calm, refusing to let the moment rattle him. "I have a reservation," Ethan said simply. "I'd like it to be checked properly." The guard frowned, clearly unimpressed. "Look, we're not going to go in circles here. Either you leave now, or I'll escort you out." Ethan let the words hang in the air. It was all too familiar. The dismissiveness, the condescension. But he wasn't leaving. Not like this. "Escort me out?" he asked, his voice steady but with an edge of steel. "Are you sure that's the route you want to take?" The guard's eyes narrowed. Marcus, meanwhile, looked pleased, as though the situation were playing out exactly how he wanted. Ethan could feel the tension building, a fragile thread threatening to snap at any moment. He glanced over his shoulder, where a few guests had paused to watch the unfolding scene. Their murmurs filled the background, speculation hanging in the air. Ethan turned back to the guard. "I'm asking for something simple. Verify my reservation. If I'm wrong, I'll leave." Marcus snorted. "We've already checked. There's nothing to verify." The guard placed a hand on Ethan's arm. "Time to go." The touch, though light, was enough to ignite a fire within him. Ethan pulled his arm back, his voice firm but even. "You're making a mistake, and you're about to find out just how big." Ethan held his ground as the lobby seemed to grow quieter. The murmurs from the guests faded, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. The security guard shifted uneasily, caught off guard by Ethan's calm yet commanding presence. Marcus, however, remained defiant, his smirk returning. "Look, buddy," Marcus said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You can't just stand here causing a scene. This is a respectable place. If you can't afford to stay here, there's no shame in." Ethan raised a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Enough," he said quietly, yet with a firmness that made Marcus falter. "You've said enough." Reaching into his pocket, Ethan pulled out a slim leather wallet and retrieved his ID. He placed it carefully on the counter, sliding it toward Marcus with deliberate precision. "Take a look. Take a good look." Marcus hesitated, his bravado momentarily faltering. He glanced at the ID, then froze. His eyes widened, and his smirk disappeared entirely. Lucy, standing nearby, leaned in to see what had caused the sudden change. Her face turned pale as realization dawned. "Wait, you're—" Marcus stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm the owner," Ethan said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority, "of this hotel and several others like it. And you've just spent the past 10 minutes dismissing me, judging me, and attempting to throw me out of my own establishment." The color drained from Marcus's face. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Lucy took a step back, her eyes darting nervously between Ethan and the security guard, who now looked just as stunned. Ethan picked up his ID and returned it to his wallet. "You didn't even bother to check my reservation," he continued, his tone steady but sharp. "You assumed, based on how I look, that I didn't belong here, and you acted on that assumption without hesitation." The guard cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "Sir, we didn't know." "That's the problem," Ethan said, turning his attention to him. "You didn't know because you didn't care to find out. It was easier to make assumptions than to treat me with the basic respect any guest deserves." A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint hum of the lobby's air conditioning. Marcus looked as though he wanted to disappear, while Lucy's hands fidgeted nervously at her sides. The security guard, now visibly uncomfortable, stepped back slightly, his earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. At that moment, the hotel manager, a middle-aged man in a sharp navy suit, hurried into the lobby. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm as he took in the scene. "Mr. Cross," he said, addressing Ethan with a mixture of respect and panic, "I had no idea you were here tonight." "That much is obvious," Ethan replied, his gaze unflinching. "I came here to observe, and what I found is deeply disappointing." The manager's face fell. I can't express how sorry I am. This is completely unacceptable." Ethan turned back to Marcus and Lucy, then to the security guard. "This isn't just about me. It's about the culture you